When you think of defensive masters, the names of Floyd Mayweather Jr., Pernell Whitaker, or even the legendary Nicolino Loche come up. The greatest of them all, however, is a little Italian-American man, Guillermo Papaleo, the Will of the Wisp, or better known as Willie Pep. Pep, who was a genius among geniuses and the greatest featherweight of all time, popularized and mastered the art of hit and not getting hit. If that wasn't enough, Pep also holds the title for possibly the greatest comeback story in the history of sports. Let's get into the history of Willie Pep, a boxing revolutionary. Willie Pep's record was extraordinary. He had amassed by the end of his career 229 wins, 65 knockouts, 11 losses, and 1 draw, with most of these losses coming at the twilight of his career. This includes a 62 win streak at the start of his career, and also a 73 undefeated streak with 1 draw included. But to truly understand his level of greatness, we need to go back to his amateur days. As an amateur, he fought at 105 pounds or around 47.5 kilos, also known as flyweight. He was held in very high regard, so high in fact that in 1938 he was scheduled to fight a welterweight. A ridiculous 42 pounds or 19 kilogram difference. To make it worse, the man he was fighting wasn't just a welterweight. He too was undefeated and the greatest fighter to have ever lived, Sugar Ray Robinson. Pep would lose a decision to Robinson, marking only 1 of 3 losses during his whole amateur career, showing just how much potential the young Pep possessed. After a successful amateur career, Pep would have his first professional fight in 1940, winning by decision. 2 years later, Pep was undefeated and challenged world champion Chalky Wright in New York at Madison Square Garden. Pep would win by unanimous decision. After winning the world title, he would continue his dominance over the division, going on a 62 win streak before losing to Sammy Angat on the 19th of March 1943. After this loss, Pep again went on a rampage, destroying every opponent he came up against until early 1947, where he was involved in a horrific plane crash. The plane crash caused Pep to suffer from a fractured leg, severe chest trauma, 2 broken vertebrae, and having to spend 5 months in a full body cast. All doctors told Pep he might not walk again. Around 5 to 6 months later, Pep returned to the ring and continued his win streak. After 73 wins in a row and surviving a plane crash, he would come up against his greatest and biggest foe, Sandy Sadler, who would deliver him his second professional loss. Sadler in this first bout would knock out Pep in round 4, a shock for the seemingly invincible Pep. So they would have a rematch a couple of months later. Pep, out for vengeance, would win a decision victory against Sadler, meaning this incredible rivalry was going to move into a trilogy fight. They began to despise each other, desperately trying not to lose to their rival. Pep, the greatest defensive fighter ever, and Sadler, one of the hardest hitting pound for pound fighters ever. The third fight would have a disappointing ending. The fight was close and both men had their fair share of the battles, but in a clinch, Pep suffered a shoulder injury and had to retire from the fight. Sadler would walk away champion, leading to their final fight, a legendary bout and heavily considered the dirtiest fight in boxing history. This fourth fight was more akin to a street fight than a display of pugilism. Throwing, tripping, elbows, stepping on each other's toes, it had it all. Pep apparently even learned judo so that he knew how to clinch properly against Sadler. But as it were, Willie Pep would again lose to Sadler, and this would be his last great fight of his career, but not the end of the Will of the Wisp. After the fourth Sadler fight, he would continue his legacy by fighting and beating most men he faced, like Armand Savoy and Fabella Chavez. But he would also start losing a few fights, including Tommy Collins or Lulu Perez. In 1959, Willie Pep would call quits on his incredible career after 2 losses in a row against Hogan Kid Bassi and Sonny Leon. But this would not last. In 1965, at the age of 43, which just for the record in the 60s was the equivalent of fighting in your mid-50s due to the lack of sports science, he would make a comeback. This comeback wasn't for long, lasting a year, but he won 9 out of 10 fights before retiring for the last time. So, looking back on Pep's history as a boxer, what were his achievements? He was a 2-time featherweight world champion, inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame, a 62 win streak and a 73 unbeaten streak, ranked the greatest ever featherweight by Bert Sugar, the Associated Press and the International Boxing Research Organisation, ranked 6th on Ring Magazine's 80 best fighters of the last 80 years done in 2002, and 3rd greatest of all time on Bert Sugar's list. Then, where do I rank Pep? I also believe Willie Pep is undoubtedly the greatest featherweight of all time, with Sandy Sadler behind him. Even though Sandy Sadler won the rivalry, Pep had a much greater impact on boxing in general. His defensive mastery, his sublime footwork wouldn't even be remotely replicated for decades to come. On top of that, his mythical no-punch round, where apparently he won a round without throwing a punch, only propagates his legend further. On my greatest of all time list, however, he ranks 3rd, only behind homicide Hank Armstrong and Sugar Ray Robinson. while just being ahead of Joe Louis and Muhammad Ali. In conclusion, looking back at Willie Pep, you see a defensive maestro, speed, high ring IQ, and ring generalship from a man who couldn't bruise a grape in a fruit fight. It really just goes to show that power isn't everything in the art of boxing. So that's the end of the video. Hopefully the audio is a bit better than last time, because the last video's audio was a bit shocking. I've actually got a mic now. So yeah, hopefully it's a bit better. I'm still getting better at it as I go along, and yeah. So thank you for watching. I'll be making these as much as I can, pretty much. So yeah, see you later. Bye.